the scientists and astronauts in waiting have their say, and toward the end of the festivities, I'm introduced. I emerge at last from behind that curtain, and I'm stunned by the thunderous ovation that greets me. These guys are literally standing on their chairs cheering. To receive this sort of overwhelming reception was beyond belief. Somehow it just didn't seem credible that a make-believe space explorer should merit the center of attention amid these real-life heroes. At any rate, I spent the rest of my day at NASA like a kid in a candy store, climbing aboard the actual Apollo 11 lunar module and touring the base, all the while shaking hands, signing autographs, and posing next to the scientists and engineers as they passed Instamatic cameras back and forth. By the time it was over, the sides of my face hurt from smiling. Late in the afternoon, I exchanged thank yous and goodbyes all around, then sped back toward the airport and climbed aboard a plane, pointed back toward L.A. Within a week, we'd begin shooting Star Trek's third season, and as this 727 shot westward, I found myself feeling really good about the show. My spirits had been buoyed tremendously by the events of the day. For the first time, I'd seen irrefutable proof that, despite Star Trek's mediocre Nielsen numbers, the series was truly appreciated. Star Trek, I mused, was going to be around for a long time. July 20th, 1968, Los Angeles, California. Things have taken a decided turn for the worse. Almost immediately upon my return to L.A., I'm told NBC has made some last-minute revisions to its upcoming prime-time lineup. Star Trek has been bumped to the network's television graveyard, Friday nights at 10. The time slot is a perennial loser for the network and especially inappropriate for Star Trek in that the majority of our audience is composed of kids and young adults. This new NBC schedule virtually guarantees that the larger percentage of our potential viewers will now be out on dates or safely tucked in their beds by the time we come on the air. My optimism in regard to the upcoming season is gone. Shortly thereafter, Gene Roddenberry is gone, too. Angered by NBC's scheduling decisions, Roddenberry offers NBC an ultimatum. Return Star Trek to Monday nights at 7:30, he says, or I walk. Been nice working with you, they reply. Gene's departure vaporizes the last of NBC's dwindling faith in Star Trek, and within the week, they decided to hedge their bets and cut some of their probable losses by hacking generously at our budget. We could no longer afford to shoot on location. We couldn't afford to create many new sets. We couldn't afford many special effects. We couldn't even afford scripts that required any number of guest stars. Additionally, our budgetary restrictions forced us to shorten our shooting schedule from 6 days per episode to 5. That demanded less rehearsal, fewer takes of each scene, less time to perfect the lighting or design of any given set, less complicated camera moves, and less ability to experiment. In short, it straitjacketed our creativity while allowing the tension level on our set to soar. As co-producer Bob Justman says, we had a budget almost large enough to do a really good radio show. With the cards stacked against us, Star Trek continued sliding further and further towards cancellation, and finally, just before Christmas, with our ratings, scripts, and spirits all sinking to an abysmal level, the show was officially put out of its misery. Having limped through 3 seasons of sporadic creative greatness and Nielsen ambivalence, the series could now be officially categorized as a failure. And then things got worse. Throughout this same period, my marriage was in deep trouble, ultimately deteriorating to the point where it, too, could be officially categorized a failure. It was a confusing, heartbreaking situation for my wife and me, one that seemed to defy all efforts toward healing. Over the course of the past several months, it had become increasingly clear that the marriage was simply over. Separation and divorce followed. I resigned myself to the breakup, but I could not even begin coming to grips with the fact that my 3 daughters, more beloved to me than anything else on the planet, were suddenly gone, living, sleeping, laughing, and playing in a different house. 5 days out of every 7 passed without my kids, and it was driving me nuts. By the month's end, I'd begun regularly counting down the 132 hours between the time I'd dropped the girls back with their mom on Sunday evenings and picked them up the following Saturday. Sometimes I'd even find myself keeping a notepad tally sheet of hours passed versus hours to go. Further, the words divorced and unemployed almost immediately conspired to leave me in a tough spot financially. In fact, I was pretty much broke. My wife's divorce settlement, arranged prior to Star Trek's cancellation, was based in large part upon my average TV star's salary of the past 3 years. Needless to say, with Trek now dumpstered, I was earning a lot less than I had in the past. The financial settlement, alimony, and child support decisions were sizable enough that I had to find work, any work, fast, so that at month's end I could write non-bounceable checks for my ex-wife, my kids, and, of course, the lawyers who allowed me to fall into such penurious situation. Job hunting was not easy, and I quickly found that my prospects of getting work on another television series were slim. Somehow the image of a green velour-clad Captain James Tiberius Kirk still lingered indelibly in most producers' minds, effectively preventing them from considering me for any other roles. To keep myself busy and financially solvent, I decided to jump back into the theater. A phone call to my agent proved fruitful, and by the time NBC had aired the final first-run episode of Star Trek, I was traveling northeast with a small troupe on the Straw Hat circuit, directing and starring in standard summer stock comedies like The 7-Year Itch. My dog Morgan, a beautiful, wet-nosed black Doberman, was with me. Like gypsies, we'd take a play with a company of actors into a new town every few days, give 4 or 5 performances, and pack up our tents and head off to the next town. Our first destination that summer was in Connecticut, and I was staying in a truly no-frills-style motel when an unpleasant mixture of travel costs, hotel bill, and my checkbook quickly convinced me that these days I couldn't afford even the most economy-style accommodations. At that point, I immediately went out and purchased a beat-up Chevy pickup truck. It wasn't pretty, but it was pretty much indestructible. By the time the 4th of July rolled around, it had already paid for itself by virtually erasing my expense lines in regard to rental car and hotel. Yes, hotel. This dirty, rusted-out 6-cylinder warhorse actually provided me with shelter as well as basic transportation. That's because filling up the pickup bed of my truck was one of the strangest sheltering devices ever to house a human being. Best described as a sort of collapsible aluminum camper, this thing spent most of its time as a compact metallic rectangle. I'd haul it from town to town as we toured, and upon scouting out a prime location in the Theater of the Week's parking lot, I'd slide this kid off the truck, open her up, insert tab A into slot B, prop the whole thing into 4 telescoping legs, tighten up a couple of screws, hook up the generator, and within 45 minutes, voila, I had my own freestanding hovel. It certainly wasn't the Ritz. It wasn't even Motel 6, but it wasn't all that bad. The attached generator allowed me to run a small stove, a fan, a tiny refrigerator, even a minuscule television set. Additionally, once I'd filled the unit's water storage tanks, I could shower, brush my teeth, and go to the bathroom. I lived that way all summer, moving into a new neighborhood every Monday, nearly all of them black-topped and half-filled with cars. I'd just park, build my house, unpack, rehearse, spend the bulk of the next 7 days depressed, lonely, and forlorn. It was terrible. I hadn't even adjusted to my girls living in another house when suddenly they were on another coast. I began sinking a lot of my hotel bill savings into payphones, dedicating full rolls of dimes to transcontinental kid-dad conferences. July 20th, 1969, East Hampton, New York. I was now in the small seasonal community of East Hampton, New York, driving in circles around the town square, cursing the fact that the tiny local theater had no parking lot. My front lawn had ceased to exist, and I'm forced to begin a search for some place, any place, to rest my poor man's Winnebago. Finally, one of the local stagehands suggests I homestead in a nearby vacant lot not too far from the ocean. Once there, I set up shop quickly, constructing my prefab camper amid the mosquitoes and million-dollar beach homes indigenous to the area. I'm working faster than usual, sweating through my home-building routine so that I might finish in time to check out the progress of NASA's Apollo 11 mission on my tiny TV. Blastoff was 4 days ago. Today, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. 20 minutes later, I'm laying across my camper's sponge rubber mattress. On my chest, a black and white 6-inch television set with an antenna concocted from a wire coat hanger and some scotch tape and a hunk of tinfoil undulates with my every breath. My head is propped on Morgan's haunches. He actually makes a pretty comfortable pillow, although he could really use a bath. Thus I watch in amazement as Neil Armstrong's one small step makes history, his giant leap for mankind, encompassing about 2.5 inches of my blurry, ghost-ridden television screen. I am awestruck by the magnitude of the day's events. I'm also well aware of the irony. Less than a year ago, I was on top of the world, playing the lead in a network television series, making good money, and hobnobbing with real astro celebs. A year later, I live in a tin box, broke, and alone except for a large, malodorous Doberman. Somehow, I can't help but feel like the victim of some grand, cosmic plan whose sole purpose is to thoroughly kick the shit out of me. Mid-August, 1969, Millburn, New Jersey. The dog days of August are burning at full force, creating steam and melanomas all over the Northeast. Still, the August heat foreshadows the onset of autumn and the long-awaited light at the end of the tunnel. I'm now counting the days until I can pack up my sheet metal motel for the last time and haul it the length